Before beginning our exercise, we'll first take a look at our animation rig. The scene is 03 begin in your project files. So before beginning any animation, it's a good idea to familiarize yourself with the control rig you'll work with. Kind of do a quick animation test just to make sure it will withstand the pressure of a complex action, and if you notice anything that is off, you'd of course then want to let your technical artist know, or if you've built the rig yourself, you'd want to spend a little bit more time and attention on those trouble spots. But just to give you an idea of the rig we'll work with, I'm actually really excited about using this simply because we've added just a few things extra to this control rig. So something you've already seen before in the past is our an extra toe bend for, let's say, foot rolls to get a better push off. But we've just added the control in place just so it's a lot easier to get in and animate that deformation. Then we have our advanced twist spine. We need to make sure that our character, as she goes through the complex actions we're about to create, that again the rig will not cave in. Normally, when we run into those type of problems, it's because of our rotation order. So we've gone ahead and addressed that issue by using a suitable rotation order, considering the twist axis that would be the main culprit to the problems we'd experience when animating a complex twist. If we were to go ahead and show the joints, what you'd see is that just selecting one of these and heading over to our attribute editor, I've used a rotate order of X, Z, Y, which does very well at preventing our joints from collapsing when the character, again, does a complex spiraling action. So, with that being said, we also have an extra control for the back. This is mainly for line of action purposes, just to make sure that we get some really nice curvature. You'll always want to aim for a great line of action in your animations, because that adds to the appeal of your character's performance. I'm just zeroing these controls back out. Another thing I'm really excited about is the forearm twist rig. Just to give you an idea of what's involved here, so I've used an IK system and a pole vector and tied that pole vector to the rotation of the wrist. That way we no longer need an extra control for the forearm twist at all. This is going to hold up very well. If you get to an extreme, eventually it will kind of flip, but notice the extreme we get. I mean, our arm will never get to this point, so that's nothing to worry about. We can consider it a threshold, so we know, okay, at an extreme point that we won't ever need to hit in an animation, well, we know that the rig will eventually tell us when to stop. And same thing goes for the upper arm. That's been built in also. And if we run into any type of twisting issues at all, we have this extra twist offset channel, but chances are we may not need to use that. So those are a few new features built in, new clavicle system, and all of this you should expect in a rigging course to come. So we will be teaching these techniques, but notice the scapula rig that's been built in. Very simple system, but it works very well, again, using IK. And then if you notice on the chest, we have an extra bone in place just to get some realistic deformations and to prevent any weird deformations around the clavicle. So that's a quick look at the control rig we'll use. We will be referencing this in, which is a great idea. That way, if any changes need to be made, we can do so from our source file. The source file we'll work with is mana rig, in your project files. So that's just something that you'd want to keep in mind. We'll take a look at that when we start our exercise. But this is the same rig file, nothing different, save for the name of the file itself. And then another thing that I'm also excited about is the buttocks preservation that we've added. And we teach this technique in our reference library on constraints, specifically the geometry constraint that was used along with a point constraint to preserve the buttocks. So if you'd like to learn how to create that type of rig, feel free to take a look at our reference library series. We do use it on a different part of the body, but the same technique applies. And the set-driven key we use is instead on the bone's rotation and scale to preserve this section of the mesh, which is prone to collapse. Okay, well, let's look at our control rig. The rotate order we're using on our controls, ZXY. I'll go ahead and head back over to the attribute editor, just pressing Control A. Again, this is to help us prevent gimbal lock. We will be doing some complex actions, and because of that, we need to make sure that we can avoid gimbal as much as possible. Otherwise, we'll, of course, run into some very weird twisting issues that may take a while to clean up in our graph editor. So to avoid that, let's try to find a suitable rotate order. So in this case, if we were to go to our rotate tool, I'll hold down the E key, hold down the left mouse button and choose Gimbal Mode. You can see that the main axis here is our Y axis. That's what drives the others. And the Z axis is the last to be evaluated. And because of that, again, if we need to clean up any gimbal issues, it won't take hardly any time. So we'll take a look at that as we proceed through this course. I'll go ahead and switch our rotate tool back to local mode. You can also do that under the rotate tool settings, just double clicking on the rotate manipulator on your toolbar. So now that we have an idea of what's involved in our control rig and we're comfortable, we're ready to work, we can now begin to block out our animation in the next lesson.